Let's break down this Burger King commercial that I shot last year. This was used as a social media ad for Burger King launching a new flavour of frozen drink. Now, this was a low budget shoot. We had to be pretty run and gun. We shot the whole thing in roughly 6 hours. So the gear I used was the RED Komodo OG with a 24-70 Sigma art lens. The only other tool I had was a 5-in-1 reflector, which I will break down how I used that later in the video. Let's break down this first shot. The reason why I like this first shot is I feel like it does multiple things within the first second. So it starts with a crash zoom, which you basically do by just filming and zooming in with your lens. Super simple. But I feel like it adds this nice bit of movement, which is a lot more interesting than if it was just static on a tripod. And then secondly, you see all of the characters in one shot. So they're introduced immediately. You can tell where they are, so that sets the scene. They're on a sunny beach. The props add to that. So there's like a beach ball, a kite, and then the actual product in the middle. And then as we zoom in, the logo is kind of like tracked to our actors. So you see the branding as well. So it kind of like all comes together in the first literally less than a second. So how I actually achieved this shot. Firstly, I started off with the lighting. Obviously, bright sunny day, can't control where the sun is. So instead, you control where the actors are. So I placed them at a 45-degree angle from the sun. So as you can see, there's a bit of a specular highlight on their forehead, so you can tell where the sun is. And this kind of created a shadow on one side of their face. And it kind of adds a bit of shadow to the product as well. So there's like a gradient from light to dark. This kind of gives it a bit of pop and makes it more kind of like three-dimensional, which I like. As the camera zooms in, the logo kind of doesn't move from where it is. So to do this, if I open up this nest, I started off by duplicating the original clip, and then I right-click, go to replace with After Effects composition. That will then open up After Effects, and then you can work from there. And then basically it's linked. So anything you change in After Effects will change in here. Once you have After Effects open, you want to click on your clip that has been imported across, head up to animation, and then track camera. And now After Effects will automatically track the shot for you. And then if you head over to effects controls at the top, you'll see 3D camera tracker is there. Now, if you scrub through, you can see it's created like these little tracking points, and they're color coded. So I think green is the most reliable. That's what I've used for the past 10 years or what. You just basically want to select them. So if you hold shift and click, I'd say 4 to 5 tracking points is quite reliable. And then right click on this massive target. I go for create null and camera. So I haven't got create null and camera because I've already created the camera, but on your screen you should have null and camera. If you click on that, it will create kind of like this invisible object which is in the space. So as you can see, there's a little target there, and that you can use as a reference. So you can copy the position of your null onto any kind of like text or logo that you add into this project. So I copied the position, scale and everything from the null onto the Fanta logo. And then you don't have to do this, but I just added a bit of an animation where the logo kind of gets bigger as well. I think I actually did this on this one. So yeah, as you can see, it kind of comes out of nowhere whilst it's tracked. So it's kind of like scaling up, and there's a bit of motion blur there, but this is optional. And then because we duplicated the clip in Premiere originally, what I will do is click on the little eye next to the raw clip in After Effects to make it invisible, and then go back into Premiere, and then that should be on its own layer, the logo we've just tracked. So then you can still add your color grade and everything to the original clip in Premiere. And I used the exact same effect for the closing shot at the end, and I just added some like text effect where it looks like it's frozen, but it's exactly the same principles. I just scanned the camera, and then I think the most reliable nodes were on like the rocks in front of their feet, So I used those. And then throughout the video, I tried to just add as much camera movement as possible. So there's another crash zoom there. And then I followed the ball as she hits it into the air there. Chased the actors. So every shot I tried to add a bit of movement to it. And then this wasn't actually planned for on the day. I decided to do this in the edit. But I got a shot of this guy with a disposable camera taking photos of the girls. I then asked the photographer, which was there on the day, if he could send over some photos of the actors. So then I incorporated this into the edit as though he was taking those kind of like Polaroid style photos. And to do this effect, to make the photos look like they're kind of like retro like that, is super simple. So if I jump into this nest here, and then if I remove these two, so that's what the original photo looked like. I then added just this white square behind the photo, so I just resized it. It's just in Premiere, it's called color matte. It starts off as the full screen, and then if you just crop it so it's just behind the photo, and then just add like a tiny edge around it just so it looks like a Polaroid. And then I downloaded this retro template, and without screening it, let me see, if I remove screen and turn the opacity up, so it looked like that. And then I brought the opacity down to 70%, changed the blending mode to screen, which basically removes the blacks from the image, so it just has all the scratches and the light leaks and everything left, which is what you want. So if I click on screen, and then that's how you get that look. If I come back to the main timeline, I just rotated it at an angle, so when they're popping up one by one, it's not just like this static bit of movement. And then behind that, I added kind of like this vintage texture to the background, just so it wasn't like a plain black or a plain white. Added some kind of like noise and grain over the top, just so there was a bit of movement. This one I quite like. Again, I came up with this in the edit. It's a transition into, it's not perfect. As you can see, I've missed her head, but it was a transition into my footage from the Komodo, from the photo. So I've kind of like scaled it up and rotated it back using keyframes, as you can see in my effects tab at the top here. I started a keyframe, and then it matches up to that next shot. And then I just added a simple fade, just literally like a cross dissolve at the end, just so it crosses into that next shot. And it's just quite a smooth transition. Again, just keeping along with the movement. The guy who was organising this wanted kind of like a nostalgic look to the video, so I used these analog vintage film effects over the top of my footage, which I literally just downloaded from the internet. If I open those up, so it looks like this, and then again you use the screen effect, so it did look like that, and then you add the screen effect and it removes the black from the image and then just leaves kind of like the elements over the top of your footage. To add to this kind of like nostalgic feel, I actually used a plugin called Dehancer, which I use on all my videos to color grade anyway, but it's got this option called halation, and if I disable that, that's how the image looks without halation. And then when you add halation, it's kind of like this, it's got this imperfect kind of halo to it, so it's got like a red fringe to everything, so there's like an outline, as you can see on his oars. Don't know if that's the right word. It's kind of, it completely turns red. So it's sort of subtle, but it kind of adds to that retro look, which I quite like. And on the day, I tried to make sure I captured quite a lot of B-roll, because I wanted to make sure that I had enough to play with in the edit. I used to just shoot kind of like the products and the models at like the same focal length, and it would just get boring. But as you can see, I've got a shot of the kite here, which is what they're looking at. A shot of the sand with shadows dancing. So it's just kind of like a bit of variety to the edit, and will hopefully keep the viewer watching. And then again, this shot, I like the crash zoom whilst there's a bit of movement in there as well. It's like a different layer to it. So as it zooms in, they put the drinks down, which I thought was quite nice. even though the drinks are actually like tissue paper, which is crazy. So I found out on the day I couldn't get any close-ups, which I was heavily relying on getting like nice water drips and stuff, but that wasn't possible. For these shots, the sun is actually behind them, so they're backlit. As you can see, she's got like a highlight on her left cheek there. And we used the 5-in-1 reflector to kind of bounce light back. So we had it below them, so it's bouncing up, using the sun's power kind of like against the shadows. Otherwise, without that 5-in-1 reflector, this would just be almost complete darkness because it was that bright on the day. So I can't recommend a 5-in-1 reflector enough for when you're shooting outside, especially on a sunny day like this. This is another example of the cross dissolve effect. You literally just right click between two clips, apply default transitions, and it will give you a cross dissolve. And the reason it works in this shot is because the camera's moving up, kind of like half following the ball, so into the clouds, and then the clouds just dissolve into the rocks in the same movement. So the camera in the next shot is still moving up onto our next character and the next scene. So kind of, as I said, like it's just a constant flow going between scene to scene rather than it just being quite static. And then this shot would have been my favorite, I think, because I really like the composition and I like the blues that are popping out and match the text. I think it's a really nice shot. However, I think it's a tad too flat. So I think there could be more shadow on his face and kind of like on her left side. But I think the sun was too high at that point that you couldn't kind of like hide from the sun. It was just above and lighting everything. But other than that, I really like this shot. So I think the shoot turned out pretty well, especially for not even a full day of shooting and this super quick turnaround. I think the main takeaway from this is to cover yourself for the edit. Shoot in camera movement for transitions and just get a variety of camera angles. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see more of these project breakdowns, as I have a backlog of hundreds. But until then, thank you for watching and I will see you in the next one.